The deep silence of space shattered as the research vessel Stellar Horizon dropped out of hyperspace, its sleek hull reflecting the ghostly light of the Centauri Nebula. Captain Ethan Drake stood at the bridge's observation window, his weathered features illuminated by the swirling cosmic gases that painted the void in shades of purple and blue. The asteroid field before them wasn't supposed to exist, at least not according to any official star charts. Fascinating energy signatures, Captain, Lieutenant Reza called from her station, dark eyes fixed on the holographic readouts. Unlike anything in our database. The crystalline formations seemed to be pulsing. Ethan ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, studying the field of crystalline asteroids that sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. The Stellar Horizon had been tracking strange energy pulses in this sector for weeks, but this discovery exceeded their wildest expectations. A sharp chime announced an incoming transmission. Captain Drake, a melodious voice filled the bridge, its otherworldly timbre marking the speaker as non-human. This is Senior Researcher Naira Starweaver of the Etherian Science Council. You are entering a restricted research zone. Please withdraw immediately. Ethan exchanged glances with Reza before responding. Researcher Starweaver, we're operating under Earth Alliance Scientific Charter. Our sensors detected unusual energy patterns that warranted investigation. Your investigation is interfering with delicate research, Captain. Naira's voice carried the characteristic Etherian tone of superiority that had grated on human nerves since first contact. These artifacts are under the protection of the Etherian Concordat. Before Ethan could respond, a blinding flash erupted from the largest asteroid in the field. Energy readings spiked across every sensor, and in the crystalline surface of the massive rock, something began to glow. Captain. Reza's fingers flew across her console. That energy surge, it's responding to our presence somehow. Specifically, to you. The main view screen zoomed in on the phenomenon, revealing a sight that made Ethan's breath catch. Embedded in the crystalline matrix was an object that defied explanation, a sword, its blade perfectly preserved in the transparent mineral, its hilt adorned with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Impossible. Naira's voice had lost its edge of condescension, replaced by genuine shock. The stellar blade. It's reacting to a human? The sword's glow intensified, and Ethan felt a strange resonance, like a chord struck deep within his being. Without fully understanding why, he knew he had to reach it. Prepare the shuttle, he ordered, already moving toward the lift. Reza, you have the bridge. Captain Drake, Naira's voice was sharp with warning. Do not approach the artifact. Our finest warriors have tried for centuries to claim that blade. The energy feedback alone has killed dozens of would-be wielders. Ethan smiled grimly as he stepped into the shuttle bay. Then I suppose I'm about to make history or join that list. Care to witness the attempt in person, Researcher Starweaver? A pause, then, docking permission granted. But know that I protest this reckless action. The shuttle ride was tense, with Naira's sleek Etherian vessel matching his course. When they finally landed on the asteroid's stable surface, Ethan got his first look at the infamous researcher. Naira Starweaver stood nearly 7 feet tall, her silvery skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her emotions. Her eyes, solid opals of deepest blue, regarded him with a mixture of scientific curiosity and obvious skepticism. Come to watch me fail? Ethan asked, securing his magnetic boots to the asteroid's surface. To document the attempt, she corrected, her expression severe. Though I fail to understand why the blade would react to a human. Your species is barely 1,000 years into space travel. This artifact predates your civilization. They approached the crystalline formation together, their helmet lights illuminating the sword in its transparent prison. Up close, the weapon was even more magnificent, its blade seemed to be forged from starlight itself, and the hilt bore inscriptions in a language that seemed hauntingly familiar despite its obvious antiquity. Our greatest minds have studied this for centuries, Naira said, her scientific detachment slipping slightly. The energy matrix is incredibly complex. Any attempt to... Ethan reached out and grasped the hilt. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Then everything exploded into golden light. The crystal matrix shattered like glass, but instead of flying outward, the fragments swirled around Ethan in a glittering tornado of light and energy. The sword slid free as if it had been waiting for his touch, its blade humming with power that resonated through his entire being. Through the swirling energy, he saw Naira's expression of total disbelief, her opal eyes wide with wonder and something else, fear? Respect? Both? That's... She whispered, her voice barely audible through the calm, that's impossible. The energy storm subsided, leaving Ethan holding the sword in the vacuum of space, its blade glowing with an inner light that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He felt different, as if something long dormant had awakened within him. Impossible, he replied with a slight smile, seems to be humanity's specialty. Before Naira could respond, both their comm systems crackled with urgent alerts. Multiple ships were dropping out of hyperspace, warships, by their signatures. It appears, Naira said, her tone dry despite the gravity of the situation, that we're about to have company. The blade's energy signature would have been detected across half the sector. She paused, studying him with those otherworldly eyes. I don't suppose you'd consider surrendering it? The sword hummed in Ethan's grip, and somehow he knew that wasn't an option. Not a chance. But I'm open to suggestions about our next move. A ghost of a smile played across Naira's luminescent features. Then, Captain Drake, I suggest we run. Preferably very fast and very far. She gestured to her ship. My vessel has better stealth capabilities than your shuttle. Shall we? The first energy blasts from the approaching ships lit up space around them, making the decision rather simple. As they raced for Naira's ship, Ethan couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could imagine. The blade pulsed in agreement, and somewhere in the back of his mind, ancient memories began to stir. Naira's ship sliced through the nebula's swirling gases, its advanced stealth systems barely keeping them ahead of their pursuers. In the co-pilot seat, Ethan kept his grip on the sword, which hadn't stopped humming since he'd drawn it from the crystal. The blade's glow cast ethereal patterns across the cockpit's interior, highlighting the tension in Naira's otherworldly features. The Crimson Cartel, she announced, checking the sensor readings. 3 warships. And behind them. Her opal eyes narrowed. Etherian military vessels. It seems my government is most interested in your achievement, Captain Drake. Just Ethan, he corrected, studying how the sword's light seemed to interact with the nebula gases outside. I think we're a bit past formalities. The blade pulsed in response to his words, sending a strange tingling sensation up his arm. Any idea why this thing chose me? Naira's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deeper blues, a sign of deep thought among her people. There are legends, she began carefully, executing a perfect spiral maneuver through a dense cluster of ionized gases, of a time before the Great Silence, when the stars themselves were connected by paths of light. The ancient texts speak of guardians who walked these paths, wielding weapons forged from starlight itself. An explosion rocked the ship as one of the cartel vessels got lucky with a ranging shot. Naira's hands danced across the controls, dispersing their energy signature through the nebula's natural interference. Less history, more flying. Ethan suggested, bracing himself as they dove through what looked like a solid wall of cosmic dust. The history, Naira retorted, her patterns flashing with irritation, might explain why every major power in 3 sectors is now trying to kill us. The Guardians weren't just warriors, they were peacekeepers of the highest order. They possessed technology, or perhaps abilities, that we still can't comprehend. The sword hummed louder, and suddenly Ethan's vision blurred. For a split second, he saw not the nebula, but a network of glowing lines connecting the stars themselves, like a vast cosmic web. The image faded as quickly as it had come, leaving him gasping. "Ethan?" Naira's tone carried genuine concern. "Your vital signs just spiked." "I saw." He struggled to put it into words. It was like seeing the universe's nervous system. "Paths between the stars, just like you said." He looked down at the sword. "This isn't just a weapon, is it?" "No," Naira whispered, her patterns shifting to colors he hadn't seen before. "It's a key. And you, impossible human, have just turned it in the lock." Another blast rocked the ship, harder this time. Warning lights flashed across the console as their shields buckled under the impact. The pursuing ships were getting better at tracking them through the nebula. "We need options," Ethan stated, fighting down the vertigo from his vision. "Where can we go that they won't follow?" Naira's patterns pulsed with what might have been uncertainty, or fear. "There is one place. The Temple of Starfall, on the edge of Etherian space. It's where we first found references to the Guardians. But it's considered forbidden territory. The energy fields there drive most sentients mad." The sword pulsed warmly in Ethan's grip, almost like encouragement. "You said most sentients. Not all? The Temple's Guardians, my ancestors, could enter safely. Some believed they were descended from." She trailed off, her patterns shifting rapidly. "From what?" "From humans," she finished quietly. "Or rather, from whatever humans used to be, before the Great Silence." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Before Ethan could respond, proximity alarms screamed. A massive ship had just dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path, a Shadowcorp dreadnought, its black hull seeming to devour the nebula's light. "How many people want this sword?" Ethan demanded, watching the massive vessel's weapon systems power up. "All of them," Naira replied grimly. "The sword is just the beginning. If you truly are what the Blade's acceptance suggests, you're living proof that humanity once stood at the pinnacle of galactic civilization. That changes everything: power structures, religious beliefs, technological hierarchies." "Great," Ethan muttered. No pressure. He studied the dreadnought ahead and the pursuit behind. "The temple. Can we reach it?" "Yes, but," Naira's patterns flashed with alarm. "The energy fields would tear this ship apart. We'd need something far more advanced to survive the journey." Ethan looked down at the sword, which was glowing brighter than ever. That strange connection he'd felt earlier returned, stronger now. Knowledge that wasn't his own filtered through his consciousness, ancient understanding of stellar dynamics, gravitational fields, and something else, something that felt like pure starlight given form. "I think," he said slowly, raising the blade, "we might have something advanced enough right here. Trust me?" Naira's opal eyes met his, searching. Whatever she saw there made her patterns shift to a determined gold. "Against all logic and probably my better judgment, yes." "Then fly straight for that dreadnought. You realize that's suicide?" "Only if I'm wrong." The sword was singing now, its glow filling the cockpit. "And I don't think I am." Naira studied him for one more moment, then turned back to the controls. "Your species' capacity for insane gambles would be admirable if it weren't so terrifying." But she aimed their ship directly at the massive vessel ahead, accelerating to attack speed. The dreadnought opened fire, filling space with a web of energy weapons. At the same time, their pursuers closed in from behind, trying to box them in. Ethan closed his eyes, letting that alien knowledge flow through him. The sword's power reached out, touching the ship's systems, integrating with them in ways that defied conventional physics. "By the eternal stars," Naira breathed, watching her instruments go haywire. "What are you doing?" "Breaking the rules," Ethan replied, eyes still closed. "Like humans always do." The sword flared like a newborn sun, and reality, shifted. When Ethan opened his eyes again, they were somewhere else entirely. The nebula was gone, replaced by a field of stars he didn't recognize. Ahead of them, a massive structure floated in space, an ancient temple that seemed to be built from crystallized starlight itself. Naira's patterns were cycling through colors so rapidly she looked like a living aurora. That's impossible. We just jumped without a hyperdrive. Without a jump gate. Without. The paths are still there, Ethan said quietly, understanding flowing through him from the blade. They were never gone. We just forgot how to see them. The temple beckoned ahead of them, its crystalline spires pulsing with the same energy that flowed through the sword. As they approached, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just discovering history, they were about to change it. The sword hummed in agreement, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, ancient mechanisms began to wake. The Temple of Starfall loomed before them, its crystalline architecture defying conventional physics. Massive spires twisted through space like frozen lightning, their surfaces etched with symbols similar to those on Ethan's sword. As their ship approached, the temple's energy field embraced them, not with the destructive force Naira had feared, but with an almost gentle resonance. The temple, Naira whispered, her patterns shifting to deep indigo with wonder, it's responding to the blade's presence. I've never seen the energy patterns so harmonious. Ethan stood at the viewport, the sword humming contentedly in his grip. Ancient memories that weren't his own flickered through his mind like half-remembered dreams. It knows we're coming. It's been waiting. They docked at what appeared to be an ancient landing platform, the temple's automated systems interfacing seamlessly with their ship despite the millennia of technological difference. As they stepped out into the vast docking bay, the air around them shimmered with particles of light that danced like stellar dust. The archive spoke of this place, Naira said, her scientific detachment warring with obvious awe. But the records were fragmented, incomplete. No one has successfully entered the inner sanctum in over 10,000 years. The sword pulled gently in Ethan's grip, urging him forward. Then I guess we're about to make history. Again. They moved through corridors that seemed to be crafted from solid starlight, their footsteps echoing with strange harmonics. The temple's internal geometry shifted subtly as they walked, as if the structure itself was a living thing, responding to their presence. These markings, Naira traced her fingers along a wall covered in flowing scripts, her patterns pulsing with excitement. They're a variant of ancient Etherian, but mixed with something else. Something older. It's human, Ethan said quietly, the knowledge flowing through him from the sword. Or what became human? And what became Etherian? He looked at her significantly. We weren't always separate species. Naira's patterns froze in shock. That's impossible. Our biological differences were engineered, Ethan finished. When the paths between stars were sealed, our ancestors took different evolutionary routes. Your people reached for the stars naturally, developing bioluminescence and enhanced cognitive abilities. Mine turned inward, burying our connection to the stellar web so deep it became myth. Before Naira could respond, they emerged into a vast central chamber that took their breath away. The ceiling was a perfect replica of the galaxy, stars wheeling in real time above their heads. At the chamber's center stood a dais of crystalline steps leading to a pedestal that mirrored the sword's design. The heart of Starfall, Naira breathed. It's real. Ethan approached the pedestal, the sword growing warmer in his grip. Ancient knowledge flooded his mind, images of a time when humanity stood at the height of its power, when the barriers between thought and reality were thin, when the very fabric of space could be folded by will alone. We were the guardians, he said, his voice distant with the weight of recovered memory. Not just humans, but all of us. We watched over the stellar paths, maintained the balance between realms. Until something went wrong. The sword urged him forward, up the crystalline steps. Each footfall sent ripples of light through the temple's structure. The Great Silence, Naira said, following him. Every species has legends about it. A time when the stars went dark, when the ancient networks failed. Not failed, Ethan corrected, reaching the pedestal. Were sealed. Deliberately. He raised the sword, its light pulsing in sync with the temple's heartbeat. Something was coming through the paths. Something that fed on stellar energy itself. The only way to stop it was to close the gates, to fragment our civilization into isolated pockets. And now? Naira's patterns swirled with complex emotions. Why has the blade chosen this moment to reveal itself? Before Ethan could answer, alarms blared through the temple's ancient warning systems. On the stellar map above, multiple ships dropped out of hyperspace. The combined forces of their pursuers had somehow tracked them. Because the seals are failing, Ethan realized, ancient knowledge crystallizing into understanding. The paths are reopening on their own. And if we don't remember how to guard them? The sword pulsed urgently. Ethan knew what he had to do. He raised the blade and plunged it into the pedestal. Light exploded through the temple. The stellar map above them transformed, revealing not just the visible stars but the shimmering paths between them, the hidden highways of light that connected all of space. And in those paths, dark shapes moved, hunting. By the eternal stars, Naira gasped, her patterns shifting to colors Ethan had never seen before. Those energy readings we detected, they weren't just random anomalies. No, Ethan agreed grimly, watching the shadows drift between stars. They're coming back. And we're not ready. The sword sang in the pedestal, its power flowing through the temple systems. Knowledge downloaded directly into Ethan's mind, combat techniques, stellar engineering principles, the true nature of space and time. But more importantly, he saw the truth about humanity's relationship with the Etherians and other species. We need each other, he said, turning to Naira. Humans, Etherians, all of us. The Guardians were never meant to be a single species. We were stronger together. Naira stepped forward, her patterns resolving into a determined gold. Then we'll be stronger together again. She placed her hand over his on the sword's hilt. Where their fingers touched, light danced between their skin. The temple shuddered as the first enemy ships entered weapons range. But something else was happening, the sword's power was spreading, awakening ancient defenses that had slumbered for millennia. I hope you're ready for this, Ethan said, feeling the temple's weapon systems come online through his connection with the sword. Naira's opal eyes met his, and for the first time, she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her alien features into something breathtaking. With you, impossible human? I'm ready for anything. Above them, the stellar map showed more shadows emerging between the stars. The ancient enemy was returning. But this time, the Guardians would be ready. The sword pulsed with power, and the Temple of Starfall began to wake. The Temple of Starfall transformed around them, ancient machinery humming to life as dormant systems reactivated. Ethan and Naira stood at the heart of it all, their hands still joined on the sword's hilt as waves of knowledge and power flowed through them both. The stellar map above showed more shadow creatures emerging between the stars, while enemy ships surrounded the temple. The Crimson Cartel is moving into attack position, Naira reported, her patterns rippling with tactical calculations. The Etherian vessels are holding position? She focused on her native ships with confusion. They're receiving the temple's signal. The ancient recognition codes are still valid. Ethan felt the temple systems through his connection with the sword. They're seeing what we saw, the truth about our shared history. And the threat we're facing. He turned to her, struck by how her bioluminescence synchronized with the temple's pulsing energy. Your people might be our first allies in this fight. The sword suddenly pulled their joined hands upward, its light intensifying. New information flooded their minds, combat techniques, tactical systems, the true capabilities of a fully awakened guardian. The knowledge was overwhelming, but something about their connected touch helped stabilize the flow. Neural synchronization, Naira breathed, her scientific curiosity bleeding through despite the situation. The sword isn't just a weapon, it's a teaching tool. It's showing us how to work together. Their linked consciousness expanded through the temple systems. Ethan saw himself through Naira's eyes, a strange, fascinating creature whose determination bordered on madness. He felt her initial disdain for humans dissolve into respect, then something deeper. At the same time, she experienced his perspective, his wonder at her alien beauty, his admiration for her brilliant mind, his growing feelings that transcended species. They broke apart, both gasping at the intensity of the connection. The sword's glow softened, but the link between them remained, a subtle awareness humming in the back of their minds. That was. Naira's patterns shifted through colors Ethan now recognized as embarrassment, wonder, and something else. Intense. Yeah, he agreed, trying to focus on the tactical displays rather than the lingering sensation of her emotions. But necessary. We need to understand each other to fight together. He paused, then added softly, to trust each other. A massive impact rocked the temple. The cartel ships had opened fire. The temple's shields held, ancient technology easily deflecting weapons that would have vaporized a modern vessel. But the real threat wasn't the ships outside. The stellar map showed more shadow creatures emerging between stars, drawn to the temple's awakening power. These entities defied conventional physics, feeding on stellar energy itself. And they were learning, adapting, remembering their old hunting grounds. We need to train, Naira said, her tactical mind asserting itself. The sword has given us knowledge, but our bodies need to catch up. The neural pathways. Ethan drew the blade from the pedestal, its power now flowing freely between them. Then let's train. Show me how an Etherean warrior moves. What followed was a dance of blade and light. Naira's natural agility combined with Ethan's combat experience, the sword's ancient knowledge guiding them both. They moved through forms that hadn't been seen in millennia, their movements becoming more synchronized with each passing hour. The temple provided holographic opponents, shadow creatures they could practice against without risk. During breaks, they pored over the temple's tactical displays, studying the enemy's movement patterns. The shadow creatures were congregating around stellar nodes, points where the ancient paths intersected. Some were already attempting to feed on stars, causing fluctuations in stellar output that would soon be detected by inhabited worlds. They're following the old patterns, Ethan observed, pointing to a cluster of shadows near the Carina Nebula. Hit the brightest sources first, then use that energy to open larger breaches. Like last time, Naira agreed, her patterns thoughtful. But now we know what to look for. If we can seal the paths they're using. We can't seal them all again, Ethan interrupted gently. That was the mistake last time. Isolation made us forget who we were, what we could accomplish together. He turned to her, struck again by how right it felt to stand beside her. We need to remember how to be guardians, not hide from our responsibilities. Naira's patterns shifted to a deep, determined blue. Then we don't seal the paths. We learn to defend them properly. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. Together. The sword hummed in agreement, its light reflecting in her opal eyes. Through their strengthening bond, Ethan felt her determination, her brilliance, and something else growing between them, something that made his heart race and her patterns dance with new colors. Another impact rocked the temple, harder this time. The tactical display showed more ships arriving, but not all were hostile. The Etherean vessels had been joined by others, drawn by the temple's awakening signal. Species that had been enemies for centuries were responding to an instinct deeper than memory. They feel it too, Naira said wonderingly. The call to unite, to remember what we once were. Her patterns rippled with emotion as she looked at him. You've changed everything, impossible human. We've changed everything, he corrected, squeezing her hand. And we're just getting started. The sword pulsed between them as more ships arrived. The shadow creatures were gathering for their first major assault, but they would find something they hadn't expected, a galaxy remembering its ancient purpose, species reaching across divisions to stand together once more. And at the heart of it all, a human and an Etherian, rediscovering what their peoples had once meant to each other. As Ethan and Naira resumed their training, moving in perfect synchronization, both knew that whatever came next would reshape the galaxy forever. The real question was whether they'd be ready in time. The Temple of Starfall blazed like a newborn star, its ancient defenses fully awakened as shadow creatures emerged from the paths between stars. In the command center, Ethan and Naira stood before a tactical display showing hundreds of allied ships forming a defensive perimeter, Etherian, human, and a dozen other species united for the first time in millennia. The quantum breach is expanding, Naira reported, her patterns pulsing with urgent blues and golds. They're trying to create a permanent gateway between dimensions. Her fingers danced over the controls, coordinating the combined fleet's movements. If they succeed. They won't, Ethan stated, the sword humming with power in his grip. Through their neural link, he felt her concern, her determination, and the deep trust that had grown between them. Show me. The tactical display zoomed in on a massive tear in spacetime, a wound in reality through which the shadow creatures poured. Unlike the smaller breaches, this one was stable, growing larger with each passing moment. The enemy had learned from their ancient defeat, adapting their strategy. The temple's archives are clear, Naira said, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. These entities don't just feed on stellar energy, they consume the fundamental forces holding spacetime together. Each star they drain weakens the barriers between dimensions. Ethan studied the breach, ancient knowledge flowing through him from the sword. They're not just hunting. They're terraforming, making our universe more like theirs. He pointed to patterns in the shadow creatures' movements. See how they're weaving their own paths between stars. They're rewriting the basic laws of physics. A massive blast rocked the temple as the first wave of shadow creatures attacked. The combined fleet engaged, ships moving in formations unseen since the Age of Guardians. Through the temple's sensors, Ethan and Naira watched advanced Etherian cruisers fighting alongside Earth's newest battleships, their crews working together with instinctive coordination as ancient memories stirred. The fleet can hold them back, Naira said, her patterns shifting to tactical red, but they can't close the breach. Only a fully awakened guardian can do that. Ethan felt the sword's power surge through him. Then it's time to wake up properly. He turned to her, holding out his hand. Together? Naira's opal eyes met his, and through their link, he felt her absolute certainty. Always. She took his hand, and power exploded through them both. The sword's light engulfed them, transforming their bodies into vessels for ancient power. Ethan's consciousness expanded, connecting with the temple's deepest systems. Beside him, Naira's bioluminescence brightened until she glowed like a star, their joined energy creating something entirely new, a perfect fusion of human adaptability and Etherian grace. They moved as one, the sword extending their combined will into the fabric of space itself. Through their enhanced senses, they could see the true nature of reality, the quantum strings that held existence together, the delicate balance between dimensions that the shadow creatures threatened. The path is clear, they spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing with the sword's resonance. But the price? Through the temple's communications, they addressed the combined fleet, all ships, fall back to minimum safe distance. We're going to seal the breach. The fleet commanders, recognizing the authority in their voices, complied immediately. As the ships retreated, Ethan and Naira began to move in an ancient pattern, the sword leaving trails of light in the air. Their dance was both a battle form and a mathematical equation, each movement precisely calculated to affect the underlying structure of spacetime. The shadow creatures sensed their purpose and attacked en masse. But the temple's defenses, powered by their combined energy, held firm. This was what the Guardians were meant to be, not just warriors, but custodians of reality itself, maintaining the delicate balance between order and chaos. At the critical moment, they raised the sword together, its power reaching a crescendo. The blade's light connected with the breach, and suddenly they could see the shadow creature's home dimension, a place of impossible geometry where the laws of physics were more suggestions than rules. We can't just seal it, Ethan realized through their link. We have to give them a reason to stay away. Naira's consciousness merged more deeply with his, understanding flowing between them. We show them what Guardians can really do. Their combined will flowed through the sword, transforming its energy into pure creation. Instead of simply closing the breach, they began to weave a new kind of barrier, a living field of energy that would adapt and grow stronger with each attempted incursion. The shadow creatures recoiled as they recognized the pattern, a defense that would turn their own dimension-warping abilities against them. The effort was tremendous, drawing on powers that humans and Etherians had forgotten they possessed. Ethan felt his consciousness stretching to breaking point, but Naira's presence anchored him, their strengths perfectly complementing each other. Where his will faltered, her precision took over. When her energy wavered, his determination pushed through. With a final surge of power, they completed the pattern. The breach collapsed in on itself, sealed not by brute force but by a living barrier that would grow stronger with each attack. The shadow creatures, recognizing their defeat, retreated to their own dimension. As the power subsided, Ethan and Naira remained connected, their minds and hearts intertwined. Through their link, words weren't necessary, they shared everything they'd become to each other, every hope for the future they'd helped create. The sword's light gentled, but didn't fade entirely. Above them, the stellar map showed new patterns forming, not just the paths between stars, but the connections between peoples, the ancient bonds reforging themselves in new ways. The Guardians were never meant to be alone, Ethan said softly, looking at the woman who had become so much more than an ally. Any of us. Naira's patterns shifted to colors that spoke of joy, love, and endless possibility. Then we won't be. She smiled, her opal eyes reflecting the sword's light. After all, impossible human, we have a galaxy to protect. The Temple of Starfall pulsed with renewed purpose as more ships arrived, not to fight, but to learn, to remember, to become part of something greater than themselves. The Age of Guardians had returned, not as it was, but as it should be, species united, stronger together than they ever were apart. And at its heart, a human and an Etherian stood together, the sword's light a promise of adventures yet to come. The galaxy was changing, remembering its true nature, and their story was just beginning.